Hi, I'm going to be starting the evening by being completely South Asian and talking to you about my family for the next 15 minutes, so you'll have to bear with me. They're a colourful lot, though, so I hope they entertain. For those of you who watch Pakistan on the news, there is a certain one-dimensional side that one sees about Pakistan. It's all guns, beards, and poverty. For those of us who live there, and for those of us who call Pakistan home, it seems to be such a small picture of such a large and dynamic country. But what does ring true is the violence. I mean, Pakistan, as you all know, is a nuclear country. It's a new country, 63 years young this year. It's a country that's incredibly ethnically diverse, religiously diverse. There are Jews and Catholics and Anglicans, Baha'is, Zoroastrians. Of course, none of this makes it into the news. But the Pakistan that I'm going to talk to you about tonight is a violent Pakistan. But it's violent in the same way that much of South Asia is violent. If we're looking at all the post-colonial countries in the region, what we do share is we share a history of political assassinations. Now, whether you're talking about India, and as of course we know, the Gandhi family, Indira Gandhi's house is a monument to not only her assassination, but her son Rajiv's. Sri Lanka, Nepal, Burma, Pakistan, and certainly Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, the country's first leader, Mujibur Rahman, was not only assassinated, but he was killed with three of his sons, the youngest of which was 9 years old, his two daughter-in-laws, and his wife. And the men who killed Mujibur Rahman and his family, well, they were only brought to justice really recently, last year, in fact. It took 31 years. And what they said, they remained very much in the government and in the army of the country. And they said, well, we had to kill Mujib and his children, including his 9-year-old, because they were building a dynasty. And we couldn't let that happen. Pakistan certainly shares not just the dynasty, but the violence. Our first political assassination happens 3 years after partition. The man who was chosen by the founder to be the country's first appointed prime minister is assassinated in Rawalpindi. And it goes on, and I thought I would start by speaking about my own history of violence with Pakistan with my grandfather, who was the country's first democratically elected prime minister. He came to power as Pakistan was changing once more. It had become divided. East and West Pakistan became Pakistan and Bangladesh. The Pakistan army, as we all know, had committed great acts of atrocity across the border. And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto ascended to the office of this new country. And that new country, I think, in his life at least, was something he had a great imagination for. I still live in the family home in Karachi, and my book, Songs of Blood and Sword, is not just about the country, but this incredible family. And the house is sort of like a living monument. There are letters and albums. You trip over them to get to your bedroom, really, or to find a bathroom in the house. And it's a testament to a period where Pakistan had an independent foreign policy, where Pakistan took itself out of the Commonwealth because they saw it as not even a neo, but just a colonial arm of the Raj. This was a Pakistan where you had alliances with Indonesia, Sukarno, with Egypt, with African countries, as opposed to just Uncle Sam. It was the last time we had any substantial land reforms in the country. And 7 years in, my grandfather, well, less actually, 6 years in, my grandfather was overthrown by General Ziaul Haq, who came to power and turned Pakistan into a properly Islamic republic. Now, we are an Islamic republic in name, but under Zia we had the hudud laws brought in, we had the blasphemy laws brought in. So under the period of the 1980s in Pakistan, you now had 5 times-a-day prayers imposed on all businesses and schools. You had the water lines in most of the main cities, in Karachi certainly where I'm from, cut every Ramadan so that the fast would be imposed on people. General Ziaul Haq had an incredible censorship policy, and for those of you who know, the Pakistani media is quite a vibrant animal. It has moments of being incredibly fearless, and the dictatorship was one of those periods where every day the newspapers in all the provinces had to submit their stories to a censorship board, and the censorship board would just block out entire pieces. So broadsheets started to print their papers with empty boxes. So you would open up a newspaper and there'd be a story in the corner and a story on the bottom, and then just blank boxes throughout. The regime didn't think this was very funny, and they said, well, okay, you've got to fill the boxes with content. So Pakistani newspapers started to print pictures of donkeys and dogs every time the newspapers censored them. This is also the one time in our history when we've had journalists flogged in public for their resistance. You had TV censors that were so overzealous that they literally erased olive oil out of the cartoon Popeye because she wore a skirt, and that was deemed offensive to Islamic ideology. At this point, Ziaul Haq not only lords over Pakistan, he passes a law called the Hudud Ordinance, which is still in effect today in Pakistan. And what the Hudud Ordinance says is that any woman who commits the crime of adultery may be put to death. Any woman who engages in premarital sex may be put to death. So essentially the victim of rape is criminalized in today's so-called democratic Pakistan. And at this time, my grandfather was killed. He was hanged, we're told. The army buried his body. The family was never able to see the body. This is something the Pakistan Army does on occasion. In 2005, they killed a Baloch leader called Akbar Bukti, and again, his body was buried, his coffin was padlocked, and his family was presented with a Rolex watch that they were told was his, that was remarkably unscratched. And at this point, I think Pakistan's political culture changes tremendously. Not only is a military dictator allowed to put women to death, allowed to flog journalists, but amputation is the prescribed punishment for theft as part of the Hudud laws in Pakistan. What is phenomenal, however, is that in this incredibly large and diverse country, not one doctor could be found to carry out an amputation, which we know is not the case in Saudi Arabia today. Certainly was not the case when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan. They had people lining up to do amputations. Not the case in Pakistan. People fought the dictatorship, from those journalists who were flogged to the doctors who refused to carry out amputations. But it survived, and it survived again because billions of dollars from America and also Great Britain were sent over, and we suffered Ziaul Haq's dictatorship until he too was assassinated. His plane was taken out of the sky. You may have read Muhammad Hanif's Case of Exploding Mangoes. Has anyone read that one? Yeah. Well, it's not a novel. I mean, people in Pakistan really believe that Ziaul Haq's plane was downed because he was given a gift of mangoes that then exploded on the plane. So. And the history of assassinations continues. Ziaul Haq's plane is downed, and no one investigates it. I think the most intense look into Ziaul Haq's assassination is carried out by Vanity Fair magazine that sends someone over to report, who says that his murder is like murder on the Orient Express. Everybody has a motive. It's just a question of who managed not only to do it, but to cover it up. From there, I don't know how much time do I have left. Is there anyone with a watch? 7 minutes. Okay, I'll go really quickly throughout all the other people that have been killed in the country. I may have to come back again. From there, we see a period of so-called democracy come forward, and we have 11 years of revolving chairs between Benazir Bhutto, who is my aunt through no choice of my own, but she takes 2 terms in government. Nawaz Sharif, another Pakistani politician, takes 2 terms. And in these 11 years, the Hudud laws are not repealed. So it stands till today that a woman guilty of adultery can be put to death. Technically, amputations are still the prescribed punishment for theft, since those were not repealed. The blasphemy laws have not been repealed, and the blasphemy laws were another gem of Zia's that said anyone who says anything nasty about Islam can be put to death. So if you have a neighbor who happens to be a Hindu or a Christian who even looked sideways at the Quran, you can take a case against him. So in those 11 years of democracy, the blasphemy laws are not removed, the hudud laws are not removed, and really none of Zia's political legacy is taken out of Pakistan. We have in our constitution a doctrine called the doctrine of necessity, which means any time that it is necessary, the army can take over. Of course, it's totally up to the army when necessary is or what qualifies as necessary. But that remains on the books in Pakistan today. And it's in my aunt's second government that my father, Murtaza, who is an elected member of parliament, is killed. And he's gunned down outside our house as part of the regime's Operation Cleanup. At the time, in the mid-90s, Benazir had empowered her police forces to clean up the city of Karachi. There was an ethnic party that had broken her first government and that was seriously causing trouble for her second. That was ostensibly the main target for Operation Cleanup. But in the year and a half that Operation Cleanup was in effect, it was not just ethnic muhajirs who were killed, but some 3,000 men were killed on the streets of Karachi. They were journalists, they were community activists, and they were politicians. My father was one of those 3,000, and the book that I'm here speaking to you all about tonight was a look back not only at his life and his murder, but how it is that this is a country that manages to kill its own. What is not unique, because I think violence cannot be prescribed as a South Asian issue, but what is unique to the violence we see in South Asia, whether it's of dynasties or of political figures, is the silence that comes with it. Whether it's Maoists in Chhattisgarh or Tamils in Sri Lanka or journalists in Pakistan, we are told that there is a level of violence we should expect from our states and that we should be quiet about it afterwards. We're not allowed to speak about it. The book for me was breaking this silence. Pakistan is, at this point, this is one of my favorite fun facts, it's a nuclear-armed state that missed its millennium goals to eradicate polio because we couldn't guarantee the refrigeration of the vaccines. You know, it's not because we can't technically eradicate polio. You know, we've got leprosy under WHO control limits. You know, there's a wonderful medical community. But it's literally because decades worth of corrupt governments have deprived us of even the most basic resources. Maybe I'll end with a few of my other fun facts on Pakistan. The corruption is not only incredibly violent in that we still have children dying every year of polio, of diarrhea, gastrointestinal diseases claim thousands of lives every summer during the monsoon season. But you may have watched last spring, around this time last year, the war in Swat, where, well, the 7th largest army in the world, Pakistan's, joined with the 1st largest in the world, America, to rid the northern region of terrorists. And obviously the best way to do that would be to bomb incessantly from the skies. Some 3 million people were internally displaced last summer. We don't know yet how many are still being counted as an internal refugee population. There is no transparency on those numbers. But at the time that our army was not only allowing foreign planes to come and bomb our citizens, and bombing them themselves and creating this enormous refugee population, the Sindh Assembly, which is the assembly in the province I live in, held a minute's silence around June, July. They didn't hold it for the 3 million people who had been made homeless, or in fact for the thousands of people who'd been killed. But the Pakistani government held a minute's silence for the death of Michael Jackson. As far as I know, and I'm happy to hear otherwise if anyone knows anything else, Michael Jackson was not Pakistani. He never visited Pakistan and, in fact, had nothing to do with the country. But his death was marked, unfortunately, I always say Farrah Fawcett's was not, which was obviously a great case of error. The government overlooked that. But this is a country that I think people watch every day in the news, but they miss the hidden transcript of this country, that when you live there are not so hidden after all. So thank you very much. Sorry to depress you all before the next speaker.